pulling on like the moonshine roots of West Virginia, like there's still places that like it's not safe for cops to go. Like just like pot shots at like any car that comes through because like, so and so down at the end of the holler radioed up and let them know that like a car they didn't know was coming down. Like there's still places like that in West Virginia for sure.
Well, that sounds a lot cooler, but like
Yeah.
no.
You're listening to the Art and More podcast with your hosts, Nathan and BR. Nathan is a Canadian illustrator with a couple years of military experience, and BR is a British anarchist that moved to the States. Both are passionate shooters and community builders. Together, they run the Seaburn Art page. Enjoy the show.
All right. Hello, and thank you for joining us on War. I am BR on my lonesome today, hosting, but we are joined by Tyler of Dark Winter Concepts to discuss homesteading, community building, and all that good stuff. So thank you for joining me, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's a real honor as a fan of the podcast in general. It's super awesome to be on.
Well, thank you, man. I really love what you're doing over there. Whenever I see someone like start to come up, I'm like, ooh, okay, new subject matter expert. Let's see what they're up to. And then I like with you, I really like the fact that you're. One, your stuff is so good looking, which helps with proliferation. Like that's why we do what we do. Like turning information into guides that like are fit for the ADD generation. It makes a big difference with getting that
Yeah.
stuff out there. But yeah, it's really good stuff, and I love seeing more and more guys like yourself finding like new niches and new spaces to get into and get this information out to people that might not already be getting into this stuff. So kind of with that to start with, you mind sharing with people a little bit about Dark Winter Concepts and kind of like the mission of what you do?
Yeah, so it all started relatively recently, but it was really started with the endeavor of providing people with access to resources that are readily available. Like I'm not, pioneering anything. I'm not creating anything super new, but they're resources that I've collected and discovered over, years and years of learning. I'm just trying to make them more readily available for people to implement into their own lives. The the name itself actually comes from well, people who played the Division video game will be potentially familiar with it because Operation Dark Winter is a real world event that the Division was sort of based off of, but essentially it was a simulation where our government simulated like how could our country respond to a viral event, right? And we failed really dramatically. And then that was in 2001, and obviously we saw 20 years later we learned nothing and failed that test again pretty hard. And so it was kind of like a tie-in for just no one's coming to save you sort of thing. Like you can't just rely that like the government's going to show up and help. You can't just rely that there are just systems in place to help with this, because those systems are incredibly flawed and fragile and underfunded and all the other things. Like it's up to us to start building out our community resiliency plan so that we can help to cover that gap. Because even if the response does come, it's going to be a day late and a buck short.
Yep.
So empowering people.
Rescue.
Yeah, exactly. So really just about empowering individuals to work in their own communities, to be that, I don't want to say that, like that leader, that trainer, to take this information and go share it in their community and just build up that community resilience.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So how did you get started in this stuff?
Honestly, it was kind of just I started the Instagram a long time ago. It was really just like looking for community, because like I live in very rural West Virginia, right? And so there's not a lot of people around me who have similar beliefs or ideals or that sort of thing. Like they're like the people are definitely here, but it was more so just like trying to just find resources. Like I was new to firearms. I was new to like really doing this stuff for myself, as opposed to like I grew up on a farm and stuff, but like I was new to a lot of the more like, and I don't want to say like activists, but like the more active community building things that like connecting with the reasons why maybe you want to own firearms and things like that, like the educational part. and I was really just kind of searching for like-minded folks, and just started slowly building over time, and then just in this past fall decided to get serious about it. um, decided to like actually try and make it a thing, like, oh, like people that I was connecting with who are have all these great ideals and are working to make their communities better, but like they don't even know where to start when it comes to all this stuff that's really natural for me.
Yeah.
um, and so like I was really happy to be sharing something that people found valuable, um, and so I decided to kind of dive in and do it for real.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and I really do think this is going to be the future of like at least what America looks like. I can't speak to the world, but as things get less and less reliable, like the only way to have those like meaningful communities and honestly meaningful lives is to take it into your own hands because no one's going to give it to you. Like the expectation is to grind and grind and grind and never have anything for yourself and be happy with the half-assed support you get from the current system, and that that is not a particularly exciting future or one I think any of us really want to give our blood, sweat, and tears to. So
Yeah.
it's this or bust in my opinion, and fortunately plenty of other people. But yeah, getting started in it is it's quite the jump, even for like I'm sure you're still learning plenty growing up on a farm. I grew up in the countryside, and there's still so much. Like the more I learn, the more I realize how little I know, and that like therein lies why like people I bash people over the head with the word community like constantly. And some people get kind of sick of it, and it might even be like played out as a trope to some people, but like do you mind sharing kind of your thoughts on what community really means when you drill down into it?
Sure. So for me, community is, well, I mean, community is a very large and wide ranging topic. It's really, I would say, multifaceted in the sense that like you have your community, so like you have your direct neighbors, right? Like you have the people that like, if something goes down, if a disaster is happening, if just a bad storm comes through, like those are the people that you're checking in on and that you hope will check in on you, right? So like
Yeah,
that's like the very like low bar of entry. Just like know who your neighbors are and like make sure that they know who you are, so like they're not freaked out, especially if you look like me. If you show up on their doorstep, they're not gonna freak out and like not know who you are.
yeah,
um, I think the more important is your chosen community. So that is, as you are looking to build anything for surviving any sort of bad situation, like the idea that you can just be the rugged individual and that you're going to be fine is so incredibly outdated
yeah,
and unsustainable. And so it really comes down to knowing that you can't do it alone, knowing that every system that you need to survive requires more than one person to run it.
yeah,
Um, and even if you have a self-sustaining homestead and it's great, like you need people to help you with the work. You need, if you're in a really bad situation, like you need people to just like keep watch while you sleep. Like
yeah,
it comes down to like you really can't do it alone. We cannot continue to go down the pathway where there's so many people in the homesteading community who are just driving towards that isolationism. Like they want their family 100 acres and to be left alone.
yeah,
um, and I think that is a wholly unattainable thing for, I mean, 99% of people. And so we have to start looking at that, at what can we do together. Like my drive for prepping, my what I would love to be able to do with all the stuff that we are prepping is that like when something goes wrong, like I know that we are fine. Like we have what we need. Who else can I help? Like
yeah,
who else? I mean, even if it's just like giving them some rice or beans or like something, like I know that we are prepping specifically for that. Um, yeah, and that's really what it comes down to for me is like knowing as a community that you're building out that like you are building a safety network. You're building communication and just support network.
Yeah, that's probably what really stuck out to me the most about your guides and your content. Like your food prepping guide, like the very last step of both the food and water prep guide, you've got, build a longer table for the food prepping guide. And I love that because so many people are focused on like, okay, well, I'm just gonna stack canned goods and me and my family are gonna live until, the end of time, and that's that. And it's like, okay, that's great. But you can be like the most self-sufficient woodsman you like, but if your vehicle breaks down and you're not a mechanic, like, okay, great. Or like a water pump goes down and you don't have the mindset or the skill set for that, or your wife has some kind of like medical emergency, and obviously like you're not going to be going rooting around and trying to fix it with a scalpel. Like, you need someone with some serious knowledge. Like, you need to know
Hmm.
people who have relevant skill sets and who can, who have a wider network than yourself. And people, I think, at the very beginning, when you were trying to corral people towards like the self-sustaining homesteader mindset and kind of get them out of the machine, the thing I think a lot of people get, and with autonomy in general, I think a lot of people get stuck on the fact that they picture this way of living as being like a million hermits all living in their own little kingdoms, having nothing to do with each other, and they're like, that's that's unrealistic. That's not sustainable. Like, yeah, agreed. 100%.
Yep.
Like, I can't do all of that shit. I need to know people with different skill sets. And so, like, the self-sustaining homestead is a great thing, but then having the ability to network and build those things out, and also to be not only a good person, but like a a leader in your space and your mindset to proliferate the ideas of helping other people, like that is not a small thing, and something that will pay dividends in a like awful situation like a collapse, or a natural disaster or something. Being someone people look to as a good influence in the community will buy you so much goodwill in bad times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, something else that we have to remember when it comes to prepping is that I'm like, for my stuff especially, like I'm not prepping for the apocalypse, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm prepping for all the little things that like all put together probably give me a pretty good shot at some sort of doomsday scenario.
Yeah.
But like I'm prepping for, the snowstorm, I'm prepping for a tornado to come through. And my thing for that is like, if you are, I mean, for us, like we're in an area, I mean, very rural West Virginia. So like we have like one main road that comes in, it cuts in between two main areas, and like that's kind of it. So like if there was a really bad storm and like it washed out the road, like we're just kind of out here for a while. And so like there's the possibility that like yes, like we have enough for ourselves, but like if our neighbors came and asking for some food, like even once the roads fix and everything else, like they're still going to be my neighbors, and I'm going to have to look them in the eye based on what I told them. Like, did I deny them food while they were starving? And now they're going to look at me with that in mind from now on.
Yeah.
Um, and so keeping that in mind, that like you shouldn't be getting into prepping and homesteading as like, oh, like society's going to collapse, we're just going to take over, and it's going to be, we're just going to like run house, it's going to be great. Like like we're prepping for disruptions, we're prepping for economic disruptions to life, even just like losing your job, which is a super common occurrence for people, but that's
Yeah.
one of like kind of the worst things that can happen to you right now in this economic period, just potentially losing your access to being able to buy food.
Yeah.
um, yeah, just like being open to the fact that like most likely the stuff that you were prepping can just help keep someone alive long enough to like get real aid, and that like you'll probably have to like look them in the eyes after this situation and like defend your actions.
Like, that's kind of a topic that I feel like a lot of homesteaders with the more isolationist mindset might have trouble with, because there is, the topic of conversation, like if you tell everyone, like, oh yeah, we've got, 6 months, we've got 9 months, whatever, of food, like the expectation is everyone comes to your house and like, hey, we didn't prepare, like you're gonna help us out, right? Like what do you say to that kind of mentality?
Um, well, one, I generally don't. I mean, it's kind of similar to like any of the things that you may be buying for those types of situations, like not advertising how much of something you have
Yeah,
or
yeah,
how
yeah.
many of something that you have. Um, but I also think that like you communicate that with like the expectation, like yeah, like we have enough to be able to share for a few days, but that also like this kind of comes into the community part. And if you are doing like a self-sustaining homestead, um, like that takes work, and would people be willing to help you out in the garden for the day in exchange for food for a couple of days? You can look at it from the perspective that like you're not just like I see the like the meme a lot of just like you're not just like opening up your door and walking out and tossing food to the masses, right? Like if like someone's coming to you for help, and maybe you're in a situation where like you can't give as much as you would like, but maybe they have something that they can trade. Maybe they can just trade their time, which is hugely valuable. um, like I I understand the perspective that like if you are someone who is really just getting into this and like that like for what I have squirreled away, like this can only last my family for a month, in which case you really don't have a lot to share.
Yeah,
um, but and that's really where like a lot of my guidance on prepping comes into like getting those like bulk items that you just like like a couple 50-pound bags of rice that you put in mylar bags and buckets and just put them in the garage. Like they're not part of your food prep plan, but they're assets that you have.
yeah,
You know, because no matter what the situation, like even if you're only able to give someone a cup of rice, like that, you can do a lot with a cup of rice if you really need it.
yeah,
Um, yeah, that's that's kind of been my perspective on that.
yeah. um and we're talking a lot about kind of like different groups and different mindsets, but like what have your experiences been like proliferating these ideas in less typically homesteading oriented spheres?
It's been really positive. There's overly or generally positive. There's definitely been some, I don't want to say pushback, but there's been some like requests for clarification because what I'm doing out here where I have a lot of space to do it isn't applicable to someone who lives in an apartment.
Yeah,
Um, but I mean, the principles of growing a plant, the principles of those sorts of things transfer. And so if I can then like communicate like here's what we're doing for our raised beds, blah blah blah, but like here's a scaled down version that could fit on your patio or on a windowsill. Um, or things like maybe you can't store 100 gallons of water in your one bedroom apartment. Like I get it, it's like space is tight and storing a bunch of water bins isn't great, but maybe instead you should be focusing on like filtration systems, ways to just purify water at the source as you need it. um, so it's overall it's been positive. It hasn't been like a like, oh well, lucky you, like I wish I had
yeah,
that.
yeah,
It's more so like well, how can I apply this to where I'm at now? Which I'm very thankful because it's again not the situation that I'm in. So like I don't think to just naturally share that, but I love answering those prompts. Like if someone comes to me with, I mean, those I have people like send me a picture of their yard and be like, what should I try planting here? Like it's elevated, like we have this like invasive grass, like like super cool challenges that like I can. I mean, I'm not a landscape designer, but like I can give you some ideas on things that you could try growing in that space. Um, that's different than what I would grow, in a field or in some of the space that we have. But like being able to help people like with really specific problems is like the most fulfilling part of this for me.
yeah. That's I found, and this is something I was talking to you a little bit about in my messages, is like the typical go to when you talk to like your average person not in this space, when you say prepping, is to think of like, the like Discovery Channel, like loony right wing guy
Yeah.
who's like preparing for the EMP, or his like hyper specific like apocalypse scenario. So have you had much pushback, like even just mentioning the idea of prepping? Like do you like to more? I mean, I don't want to like blanket you with any labels, but not conventionally, you know, right wing prepper kind of guy.
um, I would say, and I mean, this will probably resonate with your audience pretty well. But like the think of like your the general like liberal, because it kind of stems off of like like, oh, like why would you need those like guns? Like why would you need this? Like, you know, we're totally fine. The economy, like my
The
job is
support
great. The economy's
systems,
fine.
yep, yep.
Yeah, like blinders on. Like my reality is great. Like we just need to get everyone to where I'm at.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, which is, I mean, it is a perspective that, I mean, I'm not going to fault them heavily for it because they are not in a situation where they've been pushed to seek a different path, right? So like a lot of us, whether it was just kind of becoming more aware of like the reality of the world around us, being more empathetic with people who like do not have a life or that they can just be comfortable in,
yeah.
and just being more open and empathetic to those types of people. But I mean, really, it's like anything around prepping is like any pushback has always been not on like the crazy part, but just like kind of like why would you need that? Like what situation are you actually going to use that in type thing? And it's like, I mean, we got a crazy ice storm and had a power outage for 5 days and like had to cook food on our wood stove and like it was really great to just like have all the stuff that we had to like get through that. Like we're not prepping for the apocalypse, and that's kind of where like we can kind of bring in the conversation a little bit because um, it's becoming more and more common. I think like more and more people are kind of like post COVID, more and more people are aware or were made aware that like, oh, this can happen to me. Like disruptions can touch me in my safety sphere, right?
Yeah.
Um, and now with movies like Leave the World Behind was a big one. Had people on TikTok like, oh, like I watched the movie and I went out and
Oh
bought
my
this,
god,
this,
this
and
is a
that.
thing.
And I imagine there's going to be, I mean, probably a more contentious but a similar like realization when the that A24 Civil War movie comes out. It'll be another similar like a mainstream like it can happen here moment that just gets people to ask the question. And once people ask the question, then if you are approaching prepping from the perspective of like not the apocalypse, but like next week, next month, like you're just prepping to get through a disruption, and phrasing it like that helps, I think. Like you're not like disasters because like West Virginia, like we don't have hurricanes, we barely get tornadoes, we mostly have floods. So like disaster and like stuff kind of sounds a little doomsday. But if you
Yeah,
can approach people from the perspective like a gateway experience where they kind of realize like, oh, this could happen here, like it gives you the opportunity just to have the conversation.
yeah. That has been like an interesting development over the last few years. Is like I think it went from being like a crazy doomsday kind of mentality. Like aside from like real wild outliers like, you know, Katrina or something, it's like, I'm not in Florida. Like, yeah, that's fine, you know. That nothing like that could happen here. And then you have like you said, like a simple winter storm, and even if it's not like world ending or whatever, people react like it is. Like you'll go to the store and all of a sudden like food is wiped out. Like there is just nothing on the shelves, and you know trucks can't get in for a few days, and all of a sudden like even if it's something as simple as having 2 weeks of food, not every household has that. And
Yeah,
realizing like the most basic little stock at the, you know, at the back of your pantry to start with, of like, you know, a month's worth of canned goods, rice, beans. That makes a world of difference to just have that little, oh, thank God, I still have that back there, and it's, you know, I know it's still good and worthwhile putting in my rotation of food. Like that makes a world of difference. And it, there was this funny moment during the pandemic where there was a lot of supply chain issues, and I mean those are kind of still ongoing, but when they were particularly bad, I remember people who were stacking up, not necessarily on like um sterilizing like goods and hygienic stuff like that, but like food.
Mhm.
There was a few headlines starting to go around, like kind of shaming people for like resource stockpiling and stuff like that, and it was so weird to me because like I get it, like when it's when it's in limited supply and you go in and like clear the shelf, like yeah, that's an asshole move. But if you're just doing that to build up a stock and kind of shaming, there was like it was more than just like going in and buying out a shelf. It was like shaming the mentality of the prepper or someone with that, and it was like it was the weirdest piece of propaganda. It's just like when they start going on about how like private gardens put off more carbon than industrial farming or whatever. It's like, what the fuck are we talking about? Like, are we talking about like real genuine worries, or is there something more sinister at play? And like I
Yeah.
feel like much more the latter. Like it's a lot of narrative control to be like, no, we've got this, like don't worry about it, just rely on us. And thankfully, over the last few years, people have realized like the facade has fallen a little bit, and it's now not just the guy with tinfoil wrapped around his head who knows like
Yeah.
these systems can and will fail.
Yeah. That's been. I mean, I think we can like blame a lot of that on TikTok. Like the stuff that I see on TikTok, like people getting not like well, I mean radicalized really, but not I mean more so being woken up and being shown, those little snapshots of like, oh yeah, like here's a glance behind the curtain. Like this is what's really going on. Here's why like most of the Midwest United States is going to be like ungrowable in like 40 years, and it's going to be
Yeah.
a worse dust bowl than we had in the 30s. Like, and then people like what, and then like Google it and like oh shit, like it's real.
Oh.
Like, and then yeah, the the access. I mean, obviously there's pros and cons to everything, but the access to that type of information has been, I think, a revolutionizing thing for younger generations, especially. Like they're not bought in yet, so it's really easy for them to not buy in at all, which is
Yeah.
awesome. Like, love to see it.
Yeah.
um, and it's been really awesome to see.
We are here with a quick word from our sponsors, Attorneys for Freedom, and some all-new additional benefits they've added to their Attorneys on Retainer program. If you're like 90% of our listenership and live stateside in the US and listen to this show, chances are you carry a gun. If you do, you should consider the legal implications of carrying and using that gun for self-defense. Nathan and I use Attorneys for Freedom to give us peace of mind. Attorneys for Freedom offer a drastically different setup to most run-of-the-mill concealed carry insurance programs. Attorneys for Freedom specialize in real criminal defense, providing experienced attorneys on retainer for self-defense cases across all 50 states. Attorneys for Freedom's coverage is extensive, handling scenarios often overlooked by others, such as defensive display of a firearm, self-defense from home intrusion, protection against imminent threats of serious bodily injury or death, and civil lawsuits from attackers or their families, as well as self-defense scenarios such as using while in gun-free zones or sensitive areas, while under the influence or on medication, when you knew your attacker, or while using any weapon in self-defense, from a firearm to household objects or otherwise. But there's more. With Attorneys for Freedom, you're assured of steadfast support without the fear of being dropped or facing payback demands, even in police situations. They're ready to cover 100% of your attorney fees if they can argue self-defense and serious felony charges. Nathan and I have already joined, and it's a breeze for you to do so too. The National Self-Protection Plan kicks off with a $100 one-time fee and just $35 a month thereafter. Opt for family or annual plans for even greater value. Signing up through the link in our show notes or the CBO in our Instagram bio not only supports our show, but also secures you an arsenal of additional benefits. Up to $1,000 towards firearm replacement if confiscated, up to 10 mental health counseling sessions capped at $1,500, legal representation for non-self-defense matters at 35% off attorney rates, and many more incredible benefits detailed via the link in the show notes or at attorneysonretainer.us/artandwar. Ensure you're covered in every state and ready for anything with Attorneys for Freedom. Support the show and gain peace of mind knowing you have the best in legal defense on your side. Thanks for listening. How's it going, lads and ladies? BR here with a quick word from the longest running sponsor of the Art and War podcast, Advanced Warfighting Solutions. AWS have been making tough as hell gear for decades right here in the US in North Carolina. Nathan, myself, and thousands of others run that gear through the ringer and trust our lives to it, whether that's LARPing in the woods or dragging kit through war zones. AWS manufactures many great packs, pouches, plate carriers, and our personal favorite, the SMU Operator Belt. A set and forget gun belt that crushes in build quality, capability, and excellent feedback from its many users. We are tough on our gear here at Art and War, and the SMU takes that treatment in its stride. Though already at a sweet price point, you can knock $10 more off your SMU belt with the code ARTandWar10 at awsin.com. The code and link to the AWS website can be found in the show description. Thanks for listening, now let's get back to the show. No, that has been, I think, a big part of the paradigm shift too, with like the more recent generations. Like, you see kind of like a little bit of a split in thinking with the millennials. Like, some are just like so bought into it, like the ship has sailed and I love my corporate job, pained smile, thumbs up, we're gonna make it, gang. And then the other half are like, I need land, I need to get the fuck away from this thing before it collapses. And then, as you said, the younger generation, they, like, the majority have not yet bought into like a full-time like career mindset. They're like, I am selling my soul for a system that was built for my parents and grandparents, and I'm not going to see any of the fruits of my labor. And I see through like basically the joke of what my reward for blindly participating will be. And it's a completely fucked world. And it's really wild. I mean, a lot of our audience are, kind of like, I say sort of like younger sibling age for myself. They're like that, or maybe even a little bit younger, some a little bit older, of course, but like all around that kind of age where it's like they may only have been in the workforce for like a few years, or are like about to enter it, and that kind of like really choosing where they're going to put their blood, sweat, and tears into building a foundation for the rest of their lives. And it's during such a fucking crazy time where it's like, okay, I can't be 24 and already, have bought like a perfect family home and like, do the whole nuclear family 2.5 children thing like on a single income. It's like, oh no, I have to make some very serious decisions and moves quickly to actually have any chance of stability. And that's like a really fucked up proposition that a lot of us and our slightly younger contemporaries have been faced with. And with that, you see them like hoarding to these these information sharing platforms. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of TikTok, but I really do see its utility. I think I'm gonna be an old man when I say this. It has absolutely fucked people's attention. But at the same time, like the amount of tidbits and like little bits of information and like seeds of like pretty radical thought that have been sowed by access to TikTok have been really impressive. Like, I can see why they were trying to ban that shit. I mean, this,
Yeah, yeah.
the stuff was already happening with Instagram and like with Twitter, like, but I feel like it's like wildly different with TikTok. It just seems to be at a much crazier rate.
Oh yeah. I mean, TikTok is so, it's so varied, so it's really good at like pulling you in. So like, I mean, now that they've upped like their video length to like 10 minutes, like you can upload 10-minute long videos, so you get people on there that are doing like excellent educational content. But you'll get, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce's thing, and then like Disney something or other, and then have you heard about the fall of capitalism? Blah blah. Blah. just like
Oh my
quick transition.
god!
Like, you got me. Like, it does so good about like pulling you, like, here's interest, really deep information. Like, it pulls people in.
Just seeding just a little bit here and there. Like, I've never had a TikTok, but my girlfriend has like been sitting next to me when she's been going through it, and like she does not care to be in like the political space. Like, she's down to do the homestead, down to be autonomous and all that, but doesn't like the dailies of the debates and all the bullshit. Which power to her. But
Yeah.
like, she'll just be casually scrolling through TikTok and like, oh, people going on about gardening. Oh, that's cool. And then like literally 2 or 3 TikToks later, it is some kind of radical thing. Like, I'm like, what the fuck are you watching? It sounds like something I pulled up. But hey, I mean, I'm here for it because the only way this society and culture is going to change is by people, you know, figuring that stuff out and making these decisions before they just sell us all away and submit to a life that they might not even necessarily want. And a whole lot of these kids are realizing. Like, I don't know what your thoughts are on kind of city living versus country living in today's world, but as someone out in rural West Virginia, like, do you think people should be fleeing the cities, or like what's your kind of take on that kind of the migration going on in the country right now?
Um, hmm. I I don't want to say that people should be fleeing the cities because like cities as a concept are fine. Like you when you have this amount of people, like just the general amount of people that we have, like they obviously can't all own a homestead. Like
Yeah,
there's just literally not enough land on Earth, um, and so you have concentrated, centers of populace, which should be fine if they were run reasonably well. Um, and so I think it is perfectly like understandable that people are fleeing them, and like that people are looking for space. But I think what people are really looking for is to just have an agency over their life. Because like if you're in the city, like U.S. cities especially, because if you go to other countries and stuff, like cities have they have green spaces, they have gardens, they have places where instead of a bunch of like non-fruit producing trees that just like stink and are gross, like they have fruit producing trees and like food that's being made in the city, and like it's a potential model for things that can be done better. But they have none of that here. Like they really do not have, unless you're in kind of the edge of a city or a smaller city like Pittsburgh, which I mean I've lived there a couple of times, so that's why I bring up Pittsburgh. Like where you still have enough of a sprawl where you can have some community involvement with growing food and that sort of thing. Like if you are just in like Manhattan or anywhere in like New York City, like there's nothing. um, and so I think people are kind of waking up to the fact, or woke up to the fact, that if anything goes wrong, they're stranded. Like
yeah,
there's no like local system that they could like even start to implement. Like, and I think as people just look to have that level of control, is kind of really mirroring really well with the growth of remote work, so that people like me can work in rural West Virginia for companies in San Diego and Iowa and kind of all over the place. And so like I don't have to live in a city anymore to have jobs in a good career. Um, and so I think as soon as people see like, oh, like I can do this from anywhere, I need to get some land real quick.
yeah,
Like it's a completely understandable like drive for people to have. Um, but I also think a lot of people are doing it with like no real concept of what they're getting into.
yeah. No, I think that's fair. Like, for me, I, having never grown up in a city until I, for my career, had to move to a city to get established in, graphic design, doing that kind of stuff. Like, there was no way to do that rurally unless I wanted to do like very basic, like, vinyl graphics on vans, and that would be my lot in life. And so I was like, well, fuck, I guess I got to go to a big city. And like, especially moving to a US city, I very quickly realized it was like the police state hit me so fucking hard in the face. It's like, oh wow. Like what really struck me about city living was that it feels like living within a king's castle walls is kind of like how it struck me. And it's like, fuck, that is, I it's hard for me not to be like super critical of cities in this country, just because like they have long been obviously the most controlled part of this country. Like the way they're policed, the way they're patrolled, like just seeing police helicopters like fly over you like every day routinely is wild. It's like
Yeah.
can I get some yard time? Like fuck. And so like w- with a lot of people kind of waking up to like both the police state and also just how much control and like, I mean, if you live in a city and you're in a place where like you're at risk of losing your job if there's like a flux in the economy or something, and like you're saying, like there is no support system, and there's like you've got community parks with anti-homeless architecture as far as the eye can see, and that's your lot, and that's fucking terrifying. And like in this
Yeah.
kind of economy, it's very hard for me to see like a future for US cities, honestly. And like on the flip side of that, like I'm also worried that rural rural America and rural city living will be ruined by US cities kind of and their downfall. Like as the cost of living gets absolutely stupid in cities and forces like all but the most wealthy out of them, like I'm curious what rural life becomes like and how long um being self-sustaining will be able to last, you know? Like I'm not expecting, I'm not like, hey Taylor, hey, let's fix this problem right now, but just kind of speaking out loud, I'm a little bit worried for what that looks like with the push to kind of centralize how we live our lives. Even once you escape the rat race, it's kind of, I mean, obviously there's the whole thing how you never own your home. Like you will be paying the government for the pleasure of living on the king's land forever. But
Right.
it's like I'm not sure. Um, I'm not sure what the next 20, 30 years are going to look like. You know.
I I definitely have thoughts. I definitely have thoughts on what people should consider doing if they are if they are someone who is like looking to get into homesteading or prepping, like they're looking to like just get out of like suburbs or cities and go to more rural areas, and what kind of they should probably prepare themselves for when it comes to like what it's going to look like in 20 years or what you should kind of just do now. um, my biggest thing is to not do it alone. um, like one, you hamstring yourself so much by taking on so much debt to get any meaningful amount of land. If you're doing it as yourself and or like your family, you should really be considering giving up a lot of the conveniences and luxury like accommodations that we're used to as Americans, and start considering. I mean, I don't want to say like communes because some people will get the wrong idea, but like consider what it would look
We can
like
talk
for.
communes.
I mean, like like consider what it would look like if like five families or like five like friend groups like whatever like went in and bought like 50 acres of land or 100 acres of land together. They split the cost, and instead of everyone expecting to build a nice like 4-bedroom house like whatever, like building a reasonably sized single family home and having a larger like a metal pole building, like we have a one coming here actually really soon, and they're ridiculously cheap for like the size of structure that you can get, and having like single family structures with a larger community like center community building, like your bigger like kitchen and all that sort of stuff. Like giving up the expectation of like the American large house, large space for me and my family, but like looking at like what could you actually accomplish on a chunk of land as a group of families or as a group of friends that could all like pulling your resources, like sharing the emotional and the physical and the financial burdens of starting a homestead, because like it's not just coming out here and buying a shovel and getting to work. Like there's a lot of stuff you gotta buy,
Yeah.
or that you have to put in the work to make when it comes to like even something as simple as mulch. Um, like it's a lot to do it well to the point that you can start like subsisting off of the land that you're on. And looking at kind of the state of things now, the extreme cost of land, um, like the best option I think is looking to do it as a group, like looking to share that financial burden so that you can put that extra money together into developing the land into what can actually sustain you. So you don't end up being, someone who has so much debt that like now you are locked into like you have to continue your career, like you have to keep up making enough money to make loan payments, um, and which means you don't have any time to actually develop your homestead. And so setting yourself up to be ready to be able to back away from having to work as much, to be able to spend time working to grow your own things as opposed to just being able to afford buying them, will require the sacrifice of some conveniences and luxuries. But if people are looking to get into it for the first time, like, and are they have friends that are interested and like it's a conversation that they could have, like that is the way to go. I think like it's something that we miss out on dearly, is that like we don't have like many like younger families that like we're close to like right around us. So like
Yeah.
yes, we can like have family like come visit and like help out for a work weekend, but like there's not a ton of like extra help and labor for like bigger projects. And if you're looking to really, to start off with a plot of land and make it like a subsisting homestead, like it's going to take a lot of labor for a lot of days.
Yeah.
And having that group of people, that that you generally align with, I mean, I I stray a lot away from like ever having like purity tests or like ideological purity tests essentially. But like obviously you need to be generally aligned with them to the point that you can like get along.
Yeah.
But like just having that opportunity, like that opens up the door so much for so many more people who like could never responsibly qualify for like a $400,000 loan for a reasonable sized piece of property with a house on it. Like,
Yeah.
it's not something that's attainable anymore, probably on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so looking at again community, and you get to move in with a ready-made community ready to all work towards the same goals.
The mention of purity test is kind of an interesting thing because, like, as this this vision of living a self-sustaining lifestyle becomes more and more popular, it means more and more different groups of people are going to be looking to do this, and that's something I really try and hammer home with kind of our general audience because it is wild just how many different kinds of people listen to this show, and if you put them all in the same room, they might laugh at the same dick jokes and stuff, but like there is a great variance in what they think utopia or utopia is a silly word, but a well-run society would look like. And I mean, on that note, like finding good neighbors, I think all of the purity tests and all of the labels in the world won't really do you any good if your morals aren't aligned. And that's like kind of numero uno. Like we can come from completely different um ends of the spectrum, like whatever boxes we put ourselves into. But at the end of the day, if we want like stable, safe um continuities and contingencies for our family and our friends, like that's some pretty basic human shit most of us can relate to. And obviously, like that's kind of my starting block for if someone's going to be your neighbor. Like if they're down the road, if we can agree on what's right and what's wrong, that's a hell of a good start. And if you're going to be sharing land with someone, like I probably wouldn't stick an Ancom like a hardcore libertarian, some 4chan guys, and some magic dudes all on one property. That would be a shit show. But like people who can agree to disagree and kind of like see what needs to happen in terms of like this mentality is really seeking out a life raft. Like it's not gonna be like you said, like this crazy comfortable, like, oh well, here we are, we've got the 4-bedroom house, we've got 100 acres, and you know what, the garden's going great, we got 6 cows, happy days. Like that's a great dream, but to start with, it's going to be a lot of mud, it's going to be a lot of like days of work just establishing yourself, making sure you have things as basic as, you know, water, sewage, whatever that looks like for where you're at. Actually, that's something I do want to get into with kind of utilities and more prepping specific stuff. But like finding like-minded people, is that something you've had a lot of luck with, kind of networking wise, like people who have you come across anyone who's like maybe in the future will go in on something, or like what's that gonna look like for your situation?
For where we are, like we're not really looking for someone to come. Well, I mean, we would love for people to come and move and like be our neighbors. Like
Yeah,
that would
yeah.
be like I mean, we have relatively good like terms with our neighbors. Like our like closest neighbor is someone who like literally couldn't be more different than just like imagine a preacher who mourned the death of Rush Limbaugh. So like an extremely different person from me.
Yeah.
But we'll still like if he's out like checking his mail at a time I'm out like doing some work, like he'll pop over and we'll chat real quick. Like he's been living here for like 50 years, like he knows the area, and we talk about like there's so much more you can talk about than like beliefs
Yeah,
and
no,
that sort of
100%.
stuff.
And
Like
that's a big thing of getting offline.
yeah, once you like touch grass, like there's like you can talk about grass. Like I can talk about grass all day. um I mean, while it is important to like make sure that like your community is like no matter what people believe, that like your community is safe, right? So like safe for, from my perspective, any well-meaning person to be in.
Yeah.
When it comes to, I mean, not so much like purity testing, but just like being aligned with like general beliefs. Like it is definitely a, not a qualifier, but like a level of kind of self-defense, I guess. Like how much I will get to know someone if like I'm aware of the fact that like this isn't an entirely like safe person from an ideological standpoint. Like this is someone who uses, whether it's religious or political beliefs, like as an excuse to treat people in a way they don't want to be treated, essentially.
Mm,
Like that's, I mean, again, like with a neighbor that like, yeah, we'll talk about, like whatever's going on. Like, when there's a storm, we pop over and check in on them because like they're getting up there. And yes, they know how to do most of the stuff better than I do, but if they also like, if a tree fell on their house, like they might not be able to drag it off themselves. So
yeah.
we go over and like check up on them. But like still, again, the morals are there, treating people kindly and with respect. But there is definitely a an edge to just making sure that like for me at least, like am I going to feel safe inviting someone to come here if I know that like my neighbor is hostile towards that person for
Yeah.
reasons that have nothing to do with that person, but just because they feel a certain way.
Yeah, that's actually something I wanted to get into a little bit, was like with people who might be moving to completely different parts of the country, or maybe even not all that different, but from like an urban center to a slightly more rural part of the state, who might not have the same beliefs as like the general local populace. Like, do you have any advice for kind of like feeling out that kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, one, I would say that like the, I mean, similar to what we kind of just said, where like people are extremely different in person than they are online.
Yeah.
So like if you just see like the people on TikTok and Instagram, like like try that in my town, blah 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 blah, like they're doing it for the gram,
Yeah.
and which is still like a pretty shitty like characteristic of theirs, but like it's not indicative of most people in any given area. Most people, like in my experience, especially because I'm someone who generally, I don't want to say I'm like defensive with people. Like I try to get to know people, and generally if people get to know me, we get along pretty well.
Yeah, give it a
Um,
chance, but
yeah, exactly. But like it's something that like my radar is up essentially. Like I'm looking for signs that like, oh, maybe I shouldn't divulge too much about myself to this individual.
yeah.
Um, and I mean, overwhelmingly, most people like, you don't even get to the point of like knowing what their like beliefs are or whatever. Like they just want to chat about whatever. Like especially in Appalachia, like people are so no matter what they believe, like it's very much a close knit community in the sense that like if someone sees you in trouble, they're going to help. Like
Yeah.
it's just an Appalachian like tradition, honestly.
That's
Like
something I've really loved, like having moved out here from Arizona. Uh, it this place feels so much more conducive to that kind of community-oriented spirit. Like Arizona, and like, I don't know, like I'm sure this is common in a lot of places in this country, but like those places are a lot more transient, whereas there's like an awful lot of history here and a lot of people with like deep roots. And even in my experience to newcomers, like a lot of people talk shit about people moving to states and stuff and like coming
mhm.
from other places. I don't have California plates on my truck, so that might help. But like I really haven't received. I mean, especially with my fucking accent, I come in, they're like I they'll like give me a double take when I start talking and maybe ask me to repeat myself. But like I have not had any hostility so far, which is weird.
Yeah. Um, and one other thing that I would recommend as like a tip for someone moving who's maybe they don't feel like they're going to fit in. They maybe they're just whether they're like a leftist or they're they're on that end of the ideological spectrum.
Yeah.
Start like if you're looking to like network and connect, start with like places you would expect to find people like yourself. Start like volunteering at nonprofits. Check out your local indie bookstore. I mean, one, support indie bookstores anyways. Just go buy a book, like for the sake of buying a book. But like go and look at like their bulletin board. Do they have like events going on? Like those are types of places where you're really likely to run into someone that you are generally speaking probably not too ideologically like resistant to or may not be resistant to you, and you're going to find it easier in there to like just meet some people who are from the area who can then like oh yeah like you're interested in this, like here check out this other place, like we have a class that goes on over at the university like at night, and like we get together and talk about this stuff and like do mutual aid, and like it's an in for just like a reason to meet someone, because I think that's the thing now especially that we've as a society been so alienated from each other that
Yeah.
like we need a reason to like go see someone, like we need a reason to like talk to anyone. I mean I'm absolutely guilty of this. I'm extremely like introverted. Like I'm absolutely the person who like has my phone out like scrolling through Home Depot's like apps so I don't have to like ask someone anything. um, so
No,
like
I feel
it,
that.
it yeah like it is really difficult to like just go find someone. But looking in places where again like what are the types of places that you used to go, like where you lived before, like I'll bet we have something similar out here, like we're not actually like hill people. like like we have indie bookstores, we have music venues, we have places where people hang out, and like
Yeah,
yeah like just go to places that you would normally like to go to and just talk to someone who works there.
yeah. That's something else about Appalachia I only very recently learned about. That was like very like it was fucking weird to learn that these places still exist. But I'm sure you're aware of the term like sundown towns. Like are
Mm,
those places? Yeah, I'm asking completely ignorantly. Like, are those places as dangerous as people suggest they are? Like, are they still a thing?
I wouldn't say that they're still. Well, I shouldn't speak for. There's probably still places like in the deep south where that could be the case. There's definitely still people who wish they were. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up getting that like those sorts of threats, like better not be out after the sun's down, like that sort of thing. Um, from people my age who probably like just found out like what that meant, and oh, like that's so edgy.
That's what we do
Um,
around
yeah, but like and I also grew up close to like a town that was a really notable sundown town for the state that it's in. Um, and I wouldn't say they're a problem, or like that they're still like an active thing, because it used to be like an actual like legal policy, right?
here.
Like they used to be like posted on like welcome to blah blah blah, no colors after dark, like on the city sign, right? Like it used to be there. Um, I would say there's absolutely still the threat of, bad people are going to do bad things in the dark. Like that's where cowards hide.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, I'm sure that there are a lot of towns that I haven't been to that, yeah, I would not want to walk around at night. There's a lot of places around here that I wouldn't want to walk during the day. um, like, yeah, you don't see it as much as at a town structure, or a town like size. But I mean, there are absolutely areas where, like there aren't like American flags in yards. Like there's Confederate flags and
Yeah.
Nazi flags in windows, and
Really?
like, oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Holy fuck.
Like, I mean, and those are like very off the beaten path. Like, I mean, there's still, I mean, kind of pulling on this is less for me, but like pulling on like the moonshine roots of West Virginia. Like, there's still places that like it's not safe for cops to go. Like, just like pot shots at like any car that comes through because like, so and so down at the end of the holler radioed up and let them know that like a car they didn't know was coming down. Like, there's still places like that in West Virginia for sure.
Well, that sounds a lot cooler, but like,
Yeah, yeah,
no, no, that's something like a few local guys had like kind of mentioned to me, and I was like, wait, that's not just like that's still a thing, and I mean, fuck, it's that's why we carry, right? That's that's why we have lights on our
yeah,
guns, but fuck,
yeah, absolutely. It's not something I'm gonna say like, oh, like, like that problem's resolved. Like, but as far as collective towns, I'm sure that there are tiny towns with little police offices that are in on it, and you know let other people do what they're going to do. But certainly not around here to that
yeah.
extent.
No, I mean, that's good to hear at least. But no, yeah, I wanted to touch on that because I've only talked to like a handful of Appalachians on the show, and it's just something that I've only recently learned about, and I'm like, oh well, fuck, something to tuck away and be aware of. But moving away from that fun stuff, um, something else I wanted to get into was the like things like very long term prepping, like having a solid supply of clean water for long term kind of scenarios. That's something I saw you'd put together a guide on, like in terms of like rationing and use. Like, what's your kind of setup, and how different do you think daily life would be if you were working off of only like the water resources you had like accessible?
Um, so yeah, that is an awesome question. My recommendation, I mean, is based on my own situation, which is if you have land, like talk to your local, hopefully like your Department of Agriculture, and see about getting an agricultural pond built. Um, Passive rainwater collection is the key. Like unless you're going to get like set up a fully like rainwater harvesting system that just integrates into your house and like which is a lot of work and a fair amount of money, and yeah, it's kind of a thing that can work just fine. But for us, like we have a couple of ponds on the property, um, and so like that is our extreme backup because it's certainly not clean water,
Yeah, yeah,
but I mean it's safe water. Like we've tested it. Like our soil is super clay heavy. Any like stone that's in our hills is mostly limestone, so like it filters pretty well, but it's mucky water. Um, and yeah, like for us, I mean, life would be more labor intensive. We have preps that we'd like to, like things that we would like to incorporate here in the future. Like we don't have a really good, like powerful pump to pump water out of the pond. Like we have pumps that could do like a hose, which is enough for drinking water, but we'd like to be able to like fill up a tank from a like a pump and have like I want to say it's similar to a RV water pump, which filters the water as it pumps. Um, but I mean, then we have all sorts of different mechanisms for storing and filtering. So like we have like I mean, they're under fire a little bit, but Berkey filters. Like we have a Berkey in our house that works super well. Had zero issues with it, despite the EPA deciding that because their filters have silver in them that they count as pesticides.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah. They're in a legal battle with the EPA, or they were last I checked. But super fun. um, but for us, I mean, it would really just be like water would become more labor intensive, whereas like we'd have to like think about gathering and filtering and storing it versus like turning on the tap and pouring it into the filter and then just like it's just there. Um, so I mean, for us, the next big thing would be a larger format of filter, something that can filter gallons per minute type thing, not
Mm.
like a little trickle. Just because just for the expediency of being able to like store it long term. Like we have probably a couple 100 gallons just like in our garage and jugs that get cycled out every year. Which I mean, at this point is just tap water, which is fine. Like tap water, splash a little bit of bleach in it. That will kill anything that might have come through. Um, but yeah, like that's like the biggest thing. Like the biggest recommendation is if you have space to do so, having a way for rainwater to naturally harvest itself into a pond, even if it's a small pond, like that's easier and it's less. I'm gonna say like less visible, but like the unless you're getting like a 5,000 gallon water tank, like the little 50 gallon drums you can put like under your gutters are fine, but like that doesn't stretch super far. Um,
Yeah.
so like if you're looking to do like long term, where I mean we had this past year we had a solid like month and a half of no rain, like just full on drought. Like even our pond got a little scummy because like no fresh water was filtering into it. Um, and if we had been in a situation where like we needed water then, like it would have been more difficult. Like we had like our ponds are big enough that like we would have been okay, but we would have had to be like conscious of it. And if we were just relying on the 50 gallon drums under our gutters, like those would have been gone real quick.
Mm.
um, so more passive collection and storage that can serve other purposes as well is ideal. um, but yeah, otherwise, like if you don't have the space to store a bunch of water because water takes up a lot of space, investing in filtration systems. I haven't tried the what's that company that's been pushing out the cool new filters? The Canna Provisions.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, so like I haven't tried their system. Everyone that I've seen who has tried it like sings its praises. So something like that is again just an option to be able to filter long term beyond like a life straw.
Yeah. Are those systems that are like around $800 or something like that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Pretty steep
they're
buy-in, but
yeah.
yeah.
If it's something where you're space challenged, and you can't afford or you don't have the space for like a water pump the size of a generator, something like that could be handy. And I'm pretty sure it's self-contained. So like we have a smaller like 50 gallon a minute pump that like but it needs power to run. So like you have to like bring a battery bank with it. And it's a whole thing that like I definitely couldn't like walk down to the pond with.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. You'd have to have
so
like a whole generator, and then that's another thing to fuel and
yeah.
all that good stuff.
So yeah, ways. I mean, yeah, just figuring out your systems for like either collecting it like from the source or filtering at the source, and still having to transport it. Um, just being aware of what resources you have access to. Even if you don't have a pond, if you live near a body of water of some kind, like what does that walk like? How much water can you feasibly carry through that walk? And is that something that you feel safe relying on?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
something else I wanted to touch on with like the water thing is I don't really hear many people talk about like hygiene in that kind of situation. Like, keeping yourself hydrated and fed is like very important along with shelter, but like hygiene, especially if you're living like a rough lifestyle where you are putting in the work on your property
Mm-hmm.
to to stay alive, basically, to sustain yourself. Like, do you have any kind of plans for what that would look like for you? Like, we going back to a metal tub and heating it, and having a bath once a week, or have you got any thoughts about that?
Yeah. Something that you can definitely look into is learning to make your own antiseptics, or you're making your own not antiseptics, like antibacterial like rubs,
Mm.
like versions of soap. Like not having, I mean, if you want to get into making soap, like that's also totally a thing. Um, but that way you're not super constrained to like obviously having like baby wipes, like alcohol, rubbing alcohol is like ideal, but eventually that's going to run out too. So having ways to make kind of replacements for that, whether it's, I mean, if you want to get a distillery like that, that's something that I've honestly thought about recently.
Mm.
Um, there's a lot of legislation that prevents me from operating it. But I would say the biggest thing for hygiene would be uh, beyond what you have stacked, which hopefully you just have, again, like baby wipes, rubbing alcohol, that sort of stuff that can just keep you safe, essentially. Like it's going to keep you from getting like an infection or a fungal infection or anything like super crazy. Um, but then being aware of like what's in your environment. I mean, because water is kind of water. Like even if it's like a little bit like dirty, like it's probably not like heavy bacteria dirty so that you couldn't like scrub off with it
Yeah.
if you're using something else. And so learning, I mean, yeah, learning how to make things that you can like clean yourself with. There's a lot of natural things that just grow in the woods that you can use. That will, I mean, in some cases they'll lather up, but in other cases they're at least like antibacterial or antifungal, so that it's just giving your body a little helping hand for those rough, long, dirty, weeks or months.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's something to absolutely take into consideration. Like for me, like I don't have as part of my preps or have the knowledge yet of like dental hygiene. Like once you run out of toothpaste, like I know like charcoal is a thing, which like also isn't super great for your teeth
Yeah, like,
themselves, but like
charcoal forever. Fuck my life.
yeah. And so I'm sure like there are alternatives to that as well, that are also effective, being the key. That's something that like I always want to like press on people, because I see this so much, is people foregoing like a modern product for something that, like, oh, we used to do this 150 years ago, like this is like the way to do it naturally. And
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, 150 years ago, like they used that because they didn't have anything else, and then they died by the time they were like 35.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. 40
their
was
health
old
wasn't
age.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that's always the interesting thing when like my lady, bless her, she's very into like earthy herbal kind of remedies and stuff. She's like, "Oh babe, I made soap, I made toothpaste." I'm like, "Hell yeah. What did you make it out of?" And most of the time it's like pretty good sounding stuff, but like occasionally I'm like, I'm not so sure about that. But I mean,
Yeah.
long term, you're absolutely right. Like, if we're thinking like long term, like the the system fell apart and it's not coming back. Like, the system is now this. Like, figuring out those long term alternatives. You know, that's something I feel immense guilt about, just stacking books and books and books and not reading them all. Like I've got so much more aggressive about filling out my library with all sorts of stuff that I have no clue about, like making all sorts of concoctions and like medicines from natural things you can find in our area. And it's like I am yet to put the time into those, but like my prepping brain is like, I can't learn everything, obviously. And while it would be great to diversify my network as much as possible, like worst case, if it is just down to me and her, like having these books and having a chance at learning this information, if internet wasn't available and subject matter experts weren't, um that stuff is of immense value.
Oh, absolutely. I am a huge proponent of like buying reference books. I mean, it's they can function the same way that YouTube does now, which is like if you need to fix your washer or your dryer, and like you just need to like watch a YouTube video of like, oh, like which wire goes where, and like learning like DIY stuff, right? Um, Honestly, I literally have a stack of books on my desk that I think you'll probably be interested in, to maybe add to your collection. Um, these are
Ah, I've looked
the
at those.
Anarchist Workbench, Anarchist Design Book. Huge, like wildly cool books. Also, this one, which is the Woodworker's Pocketbook. This just has like every little hand, like focusing on hand tools, like no power tools, no electricity, just
Yeah,
like every type of chisel, every like type of lathe and saw and screw, and like standard measurements for dressers and dresser drawers, and just like so much data and
yeah,
math and just resources. And like honestly, this can function if you're looking again for that long-term prep and looking to have like the tools necessary to implement the skills in the books. Like little books like this are, it's just a shopping list. Like I should have this and this and this and this because I can do all this other stuff with it if I have these instructions. um, and it's, yeah, it's a good, in general, a good resource to have. But overall, books are like the resource to have because again, you
yeah.
can't learn everything, and you can't remember everything that you learn.
Oh,
And
I
so,
can one too many
yeah.
concussions. Like I learned something, but no, I was looking at those anarchist like anarchist workbooks and stuff, and I was like, is this a gimmick? Because like I got some Instagram ad that was super targeted, and so I was just like, nah, fuck you. I rejected it on the notion that it was marketed too well to me, and I was like, nah, this can't be worthwhile. So apologies to the author. I will go and check this out.
Yeah,
You're
I
good.
I highly recommend them. Yeah,
Hmm.
like they are, like the company is three woodworkers who essentially like just ask the question like, why don't we have like the books that like 50, 60 years ago, like that was like the standard, like you had your woodworking books, and like a lot of these books are just like republished, like they're just like republishing books that are from like the 20s and 30s of just like standards of carpentry, and they're just like bringing them back to life. But they are all just like they're books by woodworkers for woodworkers, and like very much not a gimmick. So they also go into a, like the materials and stuff that they use are like they're meant to be like 100-year books at least,
Yeah.
so that like the pages won't fade, and like the book covers are legit. Yeah, they are made to, yeah, be on every prepper's bookshelf.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Okay, well I'm gonna have to pick some up now. But so we kind of we talked on water a little bit. Do you have any sort of starting advice, and maybe some more advanced advice for food prep?
Yes. My starting advice, I mean, and this plays into every bit of prepping advice that I have, which is don't overwhelm yourself. You
Yeah,
don't need to go spend $5,000 at the grocery store to get everything for a year. Um, if you are just getting into this, if you are just starting to like kind of take ownership of that part of your life, take, responsibility for just having that extra food for bad situations, like start really small with like next time you go to the grocery store, find, the can of black beans or chickpeas or something that's on sale for 89 cents and get 5 of them, and then just put that in your pantry. And just every grocery trip you go, just get a couple more cans of something, ideally something that you can find on sale, because I mean, at least at our grocery store right now, like there's a lot of canned goods that we use, but they're so cheap. It's like we could easily outfit ourselves for a month for probably $100 or less.
yeah. Which these
Um,
days is fucking crazy.
yeah, um, and so like I look at food preps as a kind of in 4 layers, where one is like just canned goods, like that's like easy to buy because it's cheap. It's easy to prepare because I mean a lot of it you can, I mean not ideally, but you can eat it out of the can pretty much. Like if you have to, they're also just easy to just like heat up, right? Like you don't have to do any extra prep. They're also easy to store. You don't need special storage containers or anything. Like they're cans. They're easy. Um, the second layer is then getting into like your dry goods. So like your rice, your beans, your lentils, things that do require a little bit of prep, like to make, but like they aren't your only resource. Like you didn't just go out and buy 50 pounds of rice and now like your power's out and you can't boil water and you can't eat your rice. Like it's not your first resource. Um, so canned goods, then your dry goods, then this isn't really food, but it's part of it, which is getting a way to make food whenever you lose all your primary ways to make food. Like power's out, your gas is out, whatever your stove or microwave runs on, getting something that's like propane fired or like a wood fired rocket stove, like those sorts of things. Finding something that works for you that you can actually use. Like, don't get a wood fired rocket stove if you live on the 30th floor of an apartment building. Like,
I
it
have
looks
you
really
ever
cool.
have you ever seen I saw this video going around recently of some homeless guys were like squatting in a penthouse and they were on like the 30th floor or something and they just had like they had propane cans as far as the eye could see. I was like, I mean, hell yeah, guys, but damn.
Like, that's that's awesome.
Sorry to knock you off course. But
Oh no.
like propane fired. Yeah. If you're rural and you can like collect fuel all day, happy days with a wood burner. And if you're in an apartment or in somewhere where you you will not have that access, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like propane, either like the small ones or just getting like the big cans, and just keeping in mind like you can absolutely use those indoors. You just need to make sure you have a carbon monoxide detector and just like open like crack a window, like get
Yeah,
some kind of ventilation in. But otherwise, like you don't need to like go outside and like set up in like the courtyard or whatever. Like you can use a little like propane cook stove just at least to boil water or heat up some beans or whatever you need to do to just like make sure that you eat. Um, and that including that is like making sure that you have cookware that can just be over open flames, um, and a way to filter water. My primary for that is a Grail water bottle, which is essentially it's like a French press but for
yeah,
filtering water.
yeah, they're really cool.
um, yeah, like they're really easy to just like scoop up some water, filter it, and it's enough to again boil it to make some food. Like it's not going to sustain your drinking water for a day, but it really quick way to get like clean, like potable water. Um, and so then after that, I look at the fourth level, which is like the big stuff, right? So like getting like the 50-pound bags of rice and putting them in mylar bags and buckets, and that's like your long term like one, either you cannot get food, like you can't go to the grocery store, nothing is available and you don't know when it's going to come back type thing, like you're running out of your other stuff and you supplement it with bulk goods like rice or beans. um, and again, like that also I guess can tie into like getting like a wheat berries if you want to like have dry wheat, but that also requires you to have a way to grind wheat. um, this was something that I actually went through like a couple of weeks ago. I kind of thought through this because I saw someone on TikTok recommending the food preps. And like the first thing you should be doing is have enough wheat grain in your pantry to like make bread for a year. And it's like that requires so much extra work and
Yeah.
tools and machinery. Like that's end game. Like if you
The
can't feed
first
yourself
thing you should
tomorrow,
do.
right? It's just like this feels like something I need to make a video about. Um, but yeah, I think then that gets into the like your big bulk, like long term storage, like sealed in a mylar bag, just tucked away, forgotten about. Like that's a really bad day you open that up. And then I guess kind of a not really a fifth level, but kind of the overarching thing is that you are just finding ways to grow and or forage and or find live food, like find fresh food, find food that's growing or just growing your own. Even if it's something as little as a basil plant on your windowsill, like start to learn what it takes, like start to learn how to care for plants, because it's not something that's like from my perspective it's not something that's natural to everyone. Like I grew up with it super, like I love soil science. I want to get into like how's my nitrogen levels, how's
Yeah.
the phosphorus. But like getting into just like learning how to care for a couple of little plants before you just like dream of having a huge garden. Like do what you can, but do it now, sort of thing. Like
Yeah.
don't wait for the perfect conditions to even start, because like you have so much to learn before you do it well. um, yeah, just start with the little things, even if it is again just herbs and spices to make the rice and beans that you're saving for a bad day taste a little bit better.
Yeah. No, that's like little morale boosts, like flavor, go a long way. Even in short-term situations, like being reduced to just like survival food will like kill your drive so early on in the game. Um,
Yeah, that's something to add to your canned goods as opposed to just buying beans. Like get like some canned peaches
yes.
or like pineapple, like
Yep,
whatever
I've got
is like
shit
your
tons of
favorite.
pineapple and cherry and things like that, where it would be like, amongst the fucking beans, which insert British joke here, like oh oh fuck pineapples, thank God.
Hey,
um,
I'll, I will honestly say, as an American, beans on toast is pretty banging. Like there's a British pub out in San Diego that I used to go to watch Premier League games, which
hey,
out there is like 5:30 in the morning, but they were open. They could serve beer at 6. Get
hell yeah,
beer, bangers and mash, beans on toast, and just like this is perfection. This is
fuck
the
yeah,
best
a
way to
man
start
of
a day.
culture. um, Hey, funnily enough, on the topic of British food, nutrition, British food is not nutritious. Like for food prep, do you prioritize like calories first? Like, where does nutrition kind of fit into your prep work? Because I mean, especially if you're going fully into the sustainable lifestyle thing, you're going to be burning a lot of calories just doing the work to
Yeah,
to maintain yourself. So like,
yeah.
how do you kind of balance that?
So it is, yeah, something that's super important. And this is something that like I feel like most people just like need to learn, which is just like how to eat like
Yeah.
reasonably well. Um, and then we have a couple of like kind of special considerations where like my wife and I like we don't eat meat. Like we don't really eat. Uh, we generally eat plant based, other than like eggs.
Mm.
And so like that like we're not just relying on like a freezer full of meat to just like be our protein. So like we had to learn about like oh yeah like peas and lentils and beans have like a similar if not greater concentration of protein like per gram or whatever, and learning how to balance meals with that. So you're not just doing like, you know, broccoli on rice, but you're adding in other things that balance out your nutrition. Um, I wouldn't say that we prioritize like calories specifically, as opposed to having a few like calorically dense things like beans and lentils,
Yeah.
while then prioritizing like the fillers, so like a rice, something that I mean obviously has its own like nutritional value, um, and to some extent I'm sure is like calorically fulfilling, um, that we yeah haven't really like min maxed out like making sure that we're getting like that we know like we need like this and this to have like a like a 1,500 calorie like day, right? Like I think we're generally speaking just like we are prepped in the sense that like we kind of already eat the food that we have saved,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Like
our
rotating it
prep
out.
pantry. Yeah, like that's kind of just what we eat already. Like we supplement it with like some frozen stuff that like we definitely won't be able to get, just like processed things that like aren't essential to our diet but they're nice to haves. um, but like we already do so much just like rice and chickpeas and beans and lentils, mixed up with good sauces and potatoes and the veggies and stuff that we grow. Like we already eat pretty well balanced. Obviously, we can always do better. We can always do more
Can't we all?
if yeah yeah like nutrition will never be perfect, and obviously it's very individual. Like I don't want anyone to think that I'm telling them like, oh, you need to be eating this balanced meal, because whatever you need is what you need. um, but yeah, like we've definitely focused on, as opposed to like having like a specific nutritional plan, is having a diverse pantry, to where we're not like we have more than just like rice and black beans and like broccoli. Like we have 7 or 8 varieties of beans and multiple types of lentils and multiple types of rice. We have a wide range of different veggies and green beans and corn and sauces and like, cream of mushroom and just all these different things that we can then pull from to make more nutritionally diverse meals, so that we aren't stuck in a situation But I think a lot of people are going to get stuck in where they just have a freezer full of meat and just have nothing but protein, and then they can't shit for a week. Like it's
No,
going to be rough
seriously.
when you just like load up like oh, we just have this and we're just going to eat this and it's going to be great. But like you need to split that up and pair it with some other stuff to get like an actual balanced nutritional palette, that's going to take care of your body better.
Yeah, and that's you mentioned something that is absolutely critical, and it might seem common sense to most people, but like prepping food that you actually already eat or would eat rather than just I'm just gonna get cans and cans of tuna and beans. It's like, okay, well, is that stuff you eat? Or from day one, like the power goes out and you can't get to the store or they're not receiving deliveries or whatever, are you instantly like fuck and just glum and your morale has been lowered to zero from day one because you're eating your prepper rations? Like for us, it's much the same as you described. Like there's lots of nice to haves. There's like all sorts of stuff that is kind of I today view as a luxury to have, in the household. Like, I mean, ridiculous things, fruit and stuff that they don't have a chance in hell of growing around here, and things of that nature, like plants. But like when it comes down to it, the stuff that we rotate out, and that's something to keep in mind with your pantry, is not just stacking it full and leaving it. Like your food shelf should be essentially a part of your like day-to-day cooking. Like I mean, I'm sure you do something similar to this. Like when you go to the store, I usually buy a few extra of what I generally get, and those will then, the newest stuff will go to the back of the pantry, and then I'll use my food store as kind of like a secondary grocery shop. I'll then take out the stuff that is like, yeah, it whatever is expiring the soonest comes out, and is
Mm-hmm.
used in the kitchen, and so on so forth. And it's not just like oh, we have to crack open the emergency food.
Right.
It's just we just have an extended pantry effectively.
Yeah. We don't want to end up like that one episode of The Office where Dwight just has to eat all of his prepper rations that he's been saving for 10 years. Um, yeah, like rotating stuff out. Like with canned goods, it's easier, I think, because again, like you don't need to, or I shouldn't say you don't need. You probably don't have 50 of each thing, right?
Yeah.
You probably have like 10 to 20 maybe, and that makes it a lot easier to like when you bring home groceries, you set those, you bring your cans in and pick ones from the back. Those go upstairs or those go into the kitchen, and then it just kind of rotates in and out. You do definitely have to like keep an eye on like every once in a while, like we'll pick up like oh like this like mixed veggie can or whatever, like it's not our favorite, but like it's like half off, like 50 cents a
Yep.
can, so we'll get a few of them. It's like those like you do need to keep an eye on and make sure like like they're not your favorite and therefore you haven't eaten any of them and they've been there for 3 years and you need to like make sure that you do actually eat them or that you like donate them. Like that's absolutely something that you can do with like canned goods that are just getting close to expiring that you can replace cheaply. Like just donate them to your local food shelter.
Yeah. Something outside of the sort of general things we think about with prepping, is there anything you you think about kind of stacking up for the purpose of trading for things you might not have thought of, or kind of, we all have our blind spots with prepping. Do you like something? I haven't gotten into this yet. Like, I am no fan of cigarettes, but something I've thought about stacking up on is like a few good cartons of cigarettes. Because I mean, if things go down and people are fiending for cigarettes, like what they what they might be willing to trade for a pack, or even the simple goodwill of being able to offer someone a pack or something, could be a pretty significant trade. Well, same with liquor or anything else that's hard to create. Like vodka, you're talking about having stuff that could potentially sterilize, like having
Mm-hmm.
vodka that's good enough to sterilize or drink is something I haven't like really delved into it yet, but and I don't know, you know, how sterilizing modern vodka is compared to kind of the trait, but like might be worth stacking away some balls.
Yeah, we have some. Although instead of vodka, I would recommend Everclear,
Mm.
which d- I wouldn't ever recommend drinking it. I've made that mistake once and never again. Um,
That's most people.
yeah, it's pretty wild, but it is. I mean, it is good enough to sterilize stuff.
Yeah.
It's very very yeah alcohol based. Um, But I mean, we got it specifically so that like in the event that we needed to, like you can mix Everclear. I want to say it was like aloe plants, and like
Mm.
blend it up and basically make like gel hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
It's like we got it for that reason when like hand sanitizer was being wiped off the shelves, and you know we had enough. Thankfully, we didn't have to crack out the Everclear, but we have it for that reason. We have a few other like varieties of alcohol for like again, like not like I'm not a big drinker, but for the purpose, like you mentioned, like being able to barter with it, being able to use it for sterilizing if you need to. Like, I mean, I literally can't imagine it'd be the worst case scenario to like clean a wound or something like that with like any type of liquor would be a pretty miserable experience. But it is something that we then have the capability to do.
Yeah.
And so I mean, that's something. Even if even if you only get it for like a month or two, like a like Sam's Club or like one of those types of places, like their liquor section is pretty affordable compared to like most other
Yeah.
places.
Yeah, a bunch of
Um,
off-brand stuff that in a pinch, like if you really want some alcohol and you have supplies to trade, like no one's gonna be worrying about name brand.
yeah, that's one of those like if you're getting to this stage of prepping, you know, so you're past like the like you got food, you got stuff, and you're also looking to get like bulk rice and you know bulk like pasta sauce to stash away because they have like the huge like gallon jugs
Yeah.
of it or 5 gallon jugs, and like you're looking for like that level of stuff. Like get a Sam's Club membership. Don't order it from some like prepping supplies incorporated.com. Like go to like say your whatever your huge bulk like membership store is, and even if you only have it for a month and you make one trip, like just load up on stuff that is just getting squirreled away, you know. It's yeah, it's really easy to go down the rabbit hole of spending a lot of money on stuff, and it's a little bit easier when you can like plan like all right, we've got this one trip and we need to get like here's our list, we need to get these things, and like it's pretty easy to stop after that because you're usually spending a pretty good chunk anyways.
Yeah, yeah.
um
Blinders on, don't look at the
yeah,
furniture, just
we do not need the 86-inch TV that's over there. Like go to the rice.
Um, on kind of to trail that, is there anything outside of what we've already discussed that your typical prepper might not think of, or anything that kind of supplemental to uh like your basic prepping that you want to share?
um hmm, that's a really good question. um I think something that doesn't get talked about enough, in some circles it does, but the implementation of technology on homesteads.
Mm,
um, there are some really cool projects being done for like basically like automating tasks on homesteads, whether it's like watering your garden, you have a water pump that is powered by solar, or you have solar powering a battery that the water pump's plugged into, and you can have a local like intranet Wi-Fi network that you can connect to. Like there's a guy on YouTube that's been doing this for a while, like building out the project and showing people how. But like he has his own system where he like he has like his own app and he like waters the garden, like opens the air vents on his greenhouse, like that sort of stuff. That little tidbit things that like they just make your life a little bit easier, and it's a little luxury that you can just build.
yeah, it just wipes out like a
And
20-minute.
assuming yeah, and if you're to that level, assuming that you then have some way to generate power, like a windmill, which I'm a big fan of, versus like solar. I mean, solar is excellent. I would love to have the money for solar. I like windmills because I understand like the engine enough to like know how to fix it or build a new one.
Yeah.
Um, but having a way to generate electricity that can then like run these kind of ancillary systems, um, and looking at ways to build your own kind of self-contained networks that are, I mean, like we have security cameras on like some of the houses here. And we really specifically sought out a system that is not connected to like the internet. Like it's not like a Google Nest or anything like that. Like it's totally local and self-contained and can't be got or can't
Hijacked. Yeah.
easily be hijacked. I'm sure there's a way. Like it's plugged in. It can someone can find it.
Yeah.
But like things like that, where you're looking at kind of self-contained systems, especially. I mean, I've been so interested in working with like a intranet Wi-Fi that can like be property reaching and have like my own like little server and running basic like just information gathering type things, like just having our own kind of information storage that can be accessed throughout our property, because we also don't have like we do not have 5G out here. um, and obviously like our Wi-Fi doesn't really extend past the house, so like as soon as you leave the house you're in a dead zone. And so looking at like, can you build your own, like can you build something that, like, sure it's not like the internet, but it's like, can you build your own systems that like you can access like some files that you have saved on your server back at your house to like pull up like a property map if you're trying to find something. Like little things like that where you also connect cameras to it. So like the idea of off grid technology, I guess maybe it's like a getting into like the realm of like solar punk a little bit, where you get into
I was
like the
about to
really
say
like
solo punk. Like so many
yeah,
people, like they angle for like return with a V, marble statue profile picture, and like all of that kind of shit. And it's like, man, that life is like fucking rough, and there's no way around it. Like homesteading is gonna be tough fucking work, but there are ways to make it less so and more attainable for the everyman, and like simple little things like that can like really change your life. And like aiming for a solar punk future instead of instead of like, well, I guess we just stop in the 1800s and call it at that. Like, I don't know,
right,
man.
yeah, like it's I'm all about systems that make things work easier. So like right now, like this year, because we have the little one joining us here pretty soon, like
Hell yeah.
we're probably not going to be doing anything like approaching the extent of like gardening that we normally do. Like coming right around the time like we should be seed starting pretty soon, and like that's not going to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
And so like this year we're really investing, or I'll be investing a lot of time into finally taking on a pretty big, like essentially like terraforming project on our property, and destroying pretty much every lawn that's here, every like yard area, and building like more sustainable food forests, but
Mm,
building them in a way where like I will not need to water them. I'll have to like mow in between like the rows, but like that's it. Building it specifically to be kind of self-sustaining, like so again it's not something that you have to do. It's not like a field that you need to like harvest and like hand plant every year and till and any of that stuff. Like building sustainable landscape is, I mean, once again something a lot of people should consider, but it is very much playing the long game. Like
yeah.
we're putting 300-ish like food producing trees in the ground this year that we won't get anything from them for at least like 5 years probably, but like we'll be really happy in 5 years that we did it this year and not 2 years from now.
Yeah. And I mean,
So
like, 10, 15, 20 years, that's some generational wealth right there. Like
yeah, that
to
is
be able to
our
hand
our
that
big
down to your
goal.
little one. Yeah. Like, hey, we built this. And I mean, I hope the next generation sees the death of the lawn. Let's let's kill that bullshit.
Yeah, I think that's one more thing that a lot of folks are waking up to, is it's kind of like they're not buying into like, why is this important? Like why do I care that like people see that I have a manicured lawn?
Yeah.
Like why? I'm not French royalty from the what 1600s.
Yeah.
Like like why should I care about this? And instead like, this is I'm in my gardening era, and they're turning their lawns into gardens and they're growing stuff. And even if it's not something that's going to last forever, like it's people using the space they have to learn at the very least, and learn how to do something that's essential. So
Yeah.
yes, death to lawns, death to golf courses, any manicured grass. Ugh.
Yeah, golf courses are a waste of a good range.
Yeah.
Let it be dust and let me hit something from 1,000 yards. All right. Well, I mean, we've covered an awful lot today. Is there anything else outside of prepping? I know I've been grilling you on the prepping stuff for like majority of the show, but is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
um,
As
I think
wide and
something that's really
esoteric as you'd like to be.
I think something that's really important, and this is something that like a lot of people will disagree with, but it's again kind of the reason that I started doing this. As like Dark Winter Concepts is kind of the reason that I really made the push into it because I saw that the need was there. Is that homesteading and prepping should not be a form of escapism. Um,
Mm,
you shouldn't be looking to. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say like you shouldn't be, but like homesteading, I don't believe should be a way for people to turn their back on social progress and try to like escape, modern society to like regress socially and like have their own little like information silo essentially where like nothing within their little fiefdom challenges their beliefs and ideals. Like they get to go back to their roots and blah 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 blah. Homesteading and prepping are such an incredible opportunity to build a better future, not to try to relive a historically really bad past. Like
yeah,
it did not it did not go well when people had to homestead to like live. I mean, obviously there's incredible stories and obviously people survive, but like it was not easy living and it was not something 95% of Americans are in any way equipped to deal with, like
yeah. They're
mentally.
they're picturing tiny homes, not homes built out of like chunks of turf with dirt floors that you sweep.
Yeah. And so like my big thing is like to use homesteading and prepping as a way to make the world a better place. Use it, as not as a way to like pull back from, things that challenge your ideologies. Um, use it as a way to make positive change in your community. And with that, I think a really big part of it comes to like if you are someone who like sees the people who are using it that way, like holding others accountable. Like whenever you see there's so many people in like prepping communities, like in my space, so like the homesteading, like gardening, like not at all in like the defensive sphere, right? Or they don't speak about it. And like being like in their comments and having like the people living out their power fantasies, like, oh, like, well, if you're not armed, I'm just gonna come take what you have, right?
Yeah.
Like that's their prepping plan is just to like exercise a power fantasy. Um, and like as I'm going I'm, I'm going to make the assumption that folks in this audience at least know someone who thinks that way. Challenge that way of thinking. Like hold people accountable that like, bro, like that's not an okay way to approach any situation, much less like other people's survival.
Yeah.
Um, like hold people accountable for their how they think that they would respond in bad situations if it is not helping others. Um, like we're all stuck in this shit. like like society is kind of crumbling around us and we're all in it.
Society is a fuck.
Like we can either be like the worst part of it or we can try to make something that's better and something that, at least has a chance of sustaining some level of like kindness and support and something again something worth living for. Like just trying to make a combative hellscape with warlords in every neighborhood, like that's not a future anyone actually wants. If they did, like there are places in the world that have experienced that. You could kind of see how it worked out there. Um, yeah, use prepping, use your drive for prepping, your drive for being as self-reliant as you can be as an individual to connect and make the world a better place for other people as well.
Yeah, no, very well said. And I think that's something people have such blanket ideas on and like absolute stances on what the future needs to be. And like the tough truth of it is wherever you lie, whether you're like, you know, as left as you can get or like a ultra trad right winger guy, like the other side will always exist. There will always be a yin to the yang. There will always be someone who thinks differently to you. And thinking in
Yep.
these absolute terms like, oh, well, when the revolution comes, or when we have our way, and when we're in power, or when everyone has submitted to one way of thinking. That shit, I don't care what you fucking think of the world. That is never going to happen. And,
Mm.
like, the more fundamental things we can agree on, like, being a good human being, treating others as you want to be treated, and things at that base level, like your neighbors very well might completely disagree with you on like your perfect little stances, but on a human level, you guys can probably find some common ground. And I think the majority of people who have been tricked into that that domination kind of mindset, they at some point, most of those people, if they don't still say they do, they believed in human liberty or the ideas of freedom and liberty. And I think, you know, trying to get back to that mindset, why this country existed in the first place, a bunch of peasants trying to get away from tyrants and people putting a boot on their neck, only to be rolled over by more boots on their neck. Like, tr- tr- try and be the best person you can be, and reflect what that society should have been, not the inevitable mess it has become, and just repeating the cycle. Like, things are
Yeah.
going to be changing in the next few decades, like one way or another. It's inevitable with the amount of different things going on in the world, and we can either repeat history or really do something different. And I think we have the technology and the right generation to do that. But on that, I'll hop off my soapbox. But
Oh, I mean, you're preaching to the choir.
yeah, no, and that's why I getting into labels and all that sort of thing. I think everyone can find a reason to disagree with someone else, but I love what you're doing, and I love that you're speaking to a part of the community that so many other people in this space aren't. And I think we need a lot more of that, because whatever your beliefs are, becoming more autonomous and self-sustaining is, I believe, the future, and the best future we have a chance for. So with that, really appreciate what you do, and really appreciate you sharing your time with me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. I mean, it's always a pleasure to get to talk about these topics. I mean, my biggest belief when it comes to any of this, when it comes to anything that I share, um, is giving people the tools to go spread this into their communities. Like, it's not. I don't want everyone to have to come to me. I don't want everyone to have to come to X organization or Y organization, because again, it is about autonomy.
Yep.
I want people to see books like the Anarchist Design Book and these different resources that they can then take and become autonomous and share with their community, to give people the tools that they need to not have to rely on a talking head on the internet
Yep.
for guidance. Like, my goal is to make as much information as easily accessible as possible.
Hell yeah. That's I love to hear it. All right, we have one last thing before we close out, and this is the only gotcha in the show. We gotta get some dad advice from about to be a dad before we head out. So the listeners, as if they are your adoring children, waiting for fatherly advice and sagely guidance.
No matter who I am or what I like, what I'm into, what I believe in, I firmly desire getting to know who my son is going to be and what he wants to become. I do not want to project my unfulfilled dreams or anything else. I am so incredibly excited to see the person that he wants to be and that he can be. Um, and my big piece of dad advice is to let people be the people that they need to be, and just give them the resources and the push that they need to go after it.
Hell yeah, no, that's awesome, and that's I hope we have all of the love of this next generation, and the wisdom to treat this this coming generation as they should be treated, and not project ourselves onto them and like finally end the many generational curses so many people have been facing. But no,
Yeah.
that's beautiful, man. All right, well, once again, thank you very much for joining me and Tyler Dark Winter Concepts. Make sure you check him out on Instagram. We'll put all of the links in the description. Anything else people should be checking you out on?
I'm actually more active over on TikTok now.
Nice.
TikTok and Instagram pretty much go hand in hand. But yeah, check me out over there. Either platform. Trying to do YouTube, but it's just one more platform. It's so much.
Yeah.
TikTok and Instagram are the main places. There will be a website by the time this episode airs.
Nice.
So that will be a thing as well, but that'll be linked through either social platform.
Cool. I'll make sure I chuck that in the description too. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you next time. And okay, bye.